Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. As you can see, I've entitled it Finding Your Way Around the BSA. The Act presents problems for several different groups of stakeholders, but by common consent among the groups most drastically affected are property owners and managing agents. There are a large number of oddities and complexities about the Act. I want to talk to you about two aspects of it that pull in strikingly different directions. On the one hand, we've got Part 5 and Schedule 8, which came into force on the 28th of June 2022, and which operates in a variety of situations to protect tenants against liability to pay service charge. On the other hand, and with effect from the 6th of April 2023, we've got Part 4 and the new Section 30D of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985, which has the effect of potentially increasing tenants' liability. If you find this confusing, you should console yourself that you are not alone in that confusion, and we will try to dispel some of it in the course of this afternoon. By and large, I'm going to assume fairly limited knowledge of the Act. Apologies if there are any of you who find this pitch too low, but personally, I find it always useful to consolidate on the things that I think I know, and hopefully you too will hear some new things as well. Many of you will be familiar with the basic layout of the Act, structured as it is in the 6 parts you see on the screen in front of you. Act structured in 6 parts with the headings that you see there. Each of parts 2 to 5 could form the subject of many webinars, but I want to start with Part 5, other provisions about safety standards, etc., and indeed a small corner of Part 5, which is the provisions of that part from sections 116 to 125 under the heading Remediation of Certain Defects. This is the part of the Act which contains protections and exemptions against the payment of service charge. Now, it's always difficult with the BSA to find a starting point. Wherever one starts, there seem to be about 5 prior steps which need explaining. But I think the best jumping off point is a provision in the middle of this range, which is section 122, and there it is on the screen in front of you. It introduces Schedule 8 in the following terms. Schedule 8 provides that certain service charge amounts relating to relevant defects in a relevant building are not payable. And then subsection B goes on to make provision for the recovery of those amounts from landlords. Now, so far, so simple, but here we encounter the first of several quite complex concepts which need to be understood in order to make sense of the Act. It's quite difficult to explain the Act without tedious recitation of the definitions found within it. And I do intend to keep those to a minimum, bearing in mind that it's impossible in a session like this to impart, let alone absorb, all of the detail. But first of all, what are relevant defects? Well, the answer to this is given by section 120. And while it's quite involved, it basically means a defect which arises as a result of works which A, were undertaken in the last 30 years, and B, which cause a building safety risk. That is a risk to the safety of people in or about the building arising from the spread of fire or collapse. Now, that is an important definition, and I just invite you to hold on to that one, building safety risk, because we're going to come back to it time and time again. It's perhaps worth observing that one term which the Act does not attempt to define or quantify is that of risk. How much of a risk is a risk? I think in practice, this is unlikely to prove unduly problematic, as we'll see what we're concerned with are measures taken for preventing a risk or reducing the severity of any incident resulting from a risk. And like the proverbial elephant, I think even without a definition, these will be easy enough to recognize in practice when we see them.